It's time for the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in. Long time no see. It's the North Idaho Prepcast back after our spring break hiatus here on IdahoSports.com. My name is Brandon Baney, joined by our Viking from the North, Ryan Scaggs. What's up, Ryan?
What's going on? Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks. So we took a week off after state basketball because we always take a week off in between seasons to kind of decompress. But I'm a big idiot and didn't realize that the following week was spring break. And guess what? Like, everybody's busy. Like, the schools are busy and don't have time to get back to us, but also like our broadcasters are, doing stuff with their kids and enjoying spring break. So we missed 2 weeks in a row, but we won't miss again until the end of the season. How's that?
Except I'm on spring break with my kid this week. So yeah.
Oh, you're a week.
We're Lane's the week after. Yeah. After the rest of the state. So.
I always forget about that. Well, too bad.
We don't start until after Labor Day. So yeah.
Okay. Hour behind everybody else, week ahead in spring or week after in spring break. So anyways,
okay.
Thank you for carving some time out of your spring break schedule to hop on, Ryan. We appreciate it.
No worries. Yeah.
All right. So what's on the docket? A lot of spring sports activities have been off and running, but we're going to look one more time at basketball season because last weekend in Coeur d'Alene at NIC, North Idaho College, we had the 20th annual Idaho statewide all-star basketball games. Ryan, you and I were both there for it. Two really exciting games. It's Team Metro, which is District 3 basically, versus Team Region, which is everywhere else. The Metro girls won 84-80, but the Region boys won 116-115. Two really tight games.
Yeah, I mean, in an all-star game too, you kind of have to spread the wealth as far as playing time and things of that nature. I think, we talked about it during the game a little bit in the boys game that it was two different games going on. I think that starting five group for the Region team was flat dominant. But there were some absolute bright spots, I believe, in that game too. And I know this is the North Idaho Prepcast, but I was really impressed with AJ LeBeau from Timberline. That kid was flat impressive against Blake Buchanan, and I think he had 21 points in the game, if I'm not mistaken. And Blake obviously got the MVP honors and the slam dunk honors, but two extremely exciting games. That girls game was impressive. I really liked the effort, and I was super impressed with Melba. Those players from Melba, that trio that came up for that game on the girls' side were super competitive. I mean, they played with a ton of heart. But it was good to see some of the girls get time on the court for one last time too, like Maddie Simmons, and being able to play in her gym that she was raised in because her dad's the coach at NIC. That was a pretty cool moment to see her finish her high school career in that gymnasium at NIC, and see some of the small school players too step up in big ways, like Kristen Wemhoff and Tara Schlater both had respectable games for the Region team as well. And it was nice to see. You always talk about it, like we want to see the small school kids play with the big school kids, and especially we talk about like the Lapways of the world and stuff like that, and can the 1A, D1 and D2 kids compete? And they flat did. I mean, they showed up. There was some really good performances from class 2A and smaller that showed up in those games, and they were really, really good players and difference makers in both ball games.
Yeah, in that boys game for Team Region, your two leading scorers, they both tied, I believe, with 19 points. It was Blake Buchanan from 5A Lake City and then Vander Brown from 1A D1 Lakeside. And so Vander Brown was there from Lakeside. Terrell Ellenwood Jones was there from Lapway. Midway through the boys game, the Lapway boys basketball coach, Zach Eastman, came in and sat down in the bleachers, and we're like, oh yeah, he's taking in the action. Well, he was taking in the action, but also after the game was over, he was taking Vander Brown and Terrell Ellenwood Jones to go play in another tournament somewhere else. So they were getting in their hoops.
I think they had to go drive to the west side, if I'm not mistaken, for a tournament over in Western Washington. So they got some hoops in, before their respective high school careers ended. But I was super impressed with Vander. Like, I've always been impressed with him as a person too. But just as a competitor, that kid doesn't quit. And I think that's one thing that I look at, kind of one of those unsung high school players in the state of Idaho that, we could be talking about years to come. That's like, who's a player that didn't get the notoriety that they should, but was a flat dominant basketball. And that was Vander, in my opinion. He's one of those guys that, last year he averaged 35 points a game for the Knights. This year he ends up, averaging less, but I think he had a better cast around him, and they end up winning a state championship. That's just one kid that plays that just goes extremely hard. And I was really impressed, and got to, talk with a few of the kids, after the breakfast and stuff too. And, talk with them before and after the game as well. And it was really neat to just be around that event and get to know some of these players. That a lot of them, the one thing that really stands out is the humility. Some these kids are so humble, and they're great competitors, but they just, they're the ones that show up early and leave late. And they're there for their teammates, and, it shows on the court, and that's how they end up in these all-star games, because they're willing to give the extra effort.
Yeah. So it was a fun weekend of basketball. Great people, great humans on Showcase as
Absolutely.
well. And both coaches, Nicole Simmons for Coeur d'Alene on the girls' side, James Two Teeth from Lakeside on the boys' side, both did a great job as well. So
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's move to spring sports now, where we had a lot of spring break, not up north, but spring break tournaments taking place down in the Treasure Valley, and some North Idaho teams went down to play. Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene baseball teams, Post Falls baseball team, they were all south last week, enjoying the weather. But before we get to the baseball and softball action, I think you and I both would say, we're big track and field guys.
Yeah.
Did you ever coach track and field, Ryan?
I didn't coach track. I ran track in high school though, but yeah,
Okay.
I never coached it. I coached tennis, like Sean Kane.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Tennis. I couldn't remember which spring sport
I'm
it was.
one of the least likely looking tennis player you'd ever see. So,
right.
Yeah. No, it was because my winter sport, because I coached wrestling, was always the first one to end. So that's how I got suckered into doing tennis.
Right. Well, speaking of tennis, just looking at teams we think will do well, Lewiston always seems to be excellent in tennis.
Sandpoint's going to be flat dominant this year. I'm just going to say, watch out for them. That Bulldog team is loaded.
And it's unfortunate that in terms of the number of athletes that are represented in state from each district, a team from the north it's going to be very hard for a team from the north, the way it currently is, to ever win a state championship in tennis, because the deck is already stacked against them, because they just don't get as many athletes advancing as teams from District 3, state of Idaho, do. So
yeah, you would have to basically sweep the doubles events and maybe sneak a champion or a runner-up in the boys and girls singles in order to have a chance, just because of numbers, and that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, but there'll be great individuals, great doubles teams that go down to state and compete from North Idaho. Lewiston, Sandpoint, Coeur d'Alene Charter has had a few excellent players over the past couple of years. Those are kind of the teams we're keeping an eye on. And the Coeur d'Alene boys are also off to a good start in tennis. But track and field, I did track and field in high school as well. We didn't have baseball. I probably would have played baseball, but Montana just this year is finally playing high school baseball.
Saw that. That's pretty awesome.
First time. It's an all classification, kind of like girls wrestling for the first year. It's all classifications will compete under one banner. And so we'll see how that goes. But here in Idaho, baseball well established, as is track and field. So I'm a big track and field guy. So are you. And already big track and field news at Post Falls High, especially on the girls' side.
Yeah, Anna Peters getting another school record, and Capri Sims setting the school record in the shot put too. Both those events took place down in Lewiston at the invite down there, which, if you look at early season meets and everything, Lewiston obviously gets a little bit better weather than, the rest of North Idaho. So, they go down there and it was like 63 degrees. So the weather was warmer. You're going to get faster times, and it showed up early. Even Post Falls boys 4x2 team had some roasting times as well, and they're winning that meet. But I like that early season event to try to see, plus you get some small school kids that show up too, that end up, making some times. Like last year we saw Beck from Highland put out some really good times. The Orofino kids had some good throws and good times down there too. So a really good event. And I look at North Idaho this year. I don't think there's going to be a state team title necessarily being very competitive out of North Idaho this year, but certainly there's going to be a lot of champions, individual champions that come out of North Idaho. Timberlake at 3A in the distance on the boys side. I really like. You got Coeur d'Alene Charter on the girls side at 3A in the distance events. They're going to be dominant again. I look at Bonners Ferry at 3A. I think that their girls teams can get some medals there at state. I don't necessarily know if they're going to win championships, but they'll certainly finish in the top 5. And then at 4A, I mean, I think you get like jumpers from Moscow. Sandpoint's got some other event runners, hurdlers that tend to be really good as well, like Rusty Lee. So I think that there's going to be some champions coming out of 4A as well. And then 5A, I like Lake City girls in the sprints. I think those events are going to play really well to the strengths of the T-Wolves. And Coeur d'Alene, I think, is going to compete a little bit too on the girl side as well. I think that they've worked hard and they got some times that are turning some heads. And then the Bengals have, down in Lewis, and they've got some individuals that are going to be very respectable as well.
Yeah. And I know Orofino has had really strong throwers the last couple of years, boys and girls. So yeah, between districts 1 and 2, there's going to be a lot of good, fun individuals to watch. So yeah, the Post Falls records were set at the first meet of the year. It was the annual Sweeney invite in Lewiston. Capri Sims, her shot put throw was 41 feet, 2.5 inches. So that's the new shot put record at Post Falls High. And then Anastasia Peters, she sets the new 2-mile, the 3,200 meter run, 11 minutes, 33.29 seconds. The record was not even a year old. Scaggs. Sammy Wood set the record last year. We remember what a great runner Sammy Wood was, 11 minutes, 34.64 seconds. So Anna Peters basically gets a second under that to reset the record for the second time in as many years.
The other thing too that I've noticed that I haven't seen Kendrick's track team turn out yet. And I heard a bunch about Nathan Twite out of Kendrick in the 400. And so I'm interested to see if he gets out on the track this spring, what kind of times he will turn out. Unless he's playing baseball, then it's a moot point. But we can talk about that later on in the Prepcast too, when we break down baseball. But yeah, I mean, you look at Post Falls and that record setting. I mean, Anna's going to break that thing probably like 6 or 7 times this year. I'm just going to be honest. Like as the weather warms up, those times are going to keep clipping down. So yeah, looking for big things from Post Falls and the core of that girls team.
Yeah, so Nathan Twite does not play baseball.
For
Kendrick.
Okay.
So
we're good there. So I mean, I'm just looking to see if he's I'm on the track and field site, and I don't see any times from Kendrick yet. So
yeah,
I was told big things from him from one of their teachers, and so that's why I'm looking forward to seeing if he ends up on the track this spring.
Okay, his middle school times were pretty impressive.
They were.
So yeah, weather, right? we're a little slow to start in some places, certainly. So yes, Nathan Twite, what a freshman year he's had at Kendrick High for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And sometimes these athletes do both, right? They'll play softball and run track, or baseball and track, especially at the smaller schools. They're not going to turn away any athletes that want to help out.
Sure. I mean, shoot, we had a basketball player at the All-Star game that wrestled and played basketball. So
yes. Yeah, for sure. Gracie Castillo from Garden Valley. So that's kind of what we're looking at in track and field, and we'll have more track and field results as more competitions are run and the weather gets a little bit better. All right, let's talk baseball, where we had, as I've mentioned, Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, Lakeland, Moscow, Sandpoint. They were all in the Boise area last week competing at various tournaments. You've got I guess the big story is, since we've hopped on to record, Ryan, 2 different no-hitters at 2 different levels have been thrown.
Yeah.
You had, let's start with Silas Naranjo from Orofino. He threw a no-hitter against Clearwater Valley at the South Fork Slugfest that's hosted by Clearwater Valley. So
yeah, I mean, that's a great performance over a decent team too. I mean, throwing a no over a state competitor is impressive, regardless of the level you're doing it at. And that tournament was deceptively competitive. I mean, it was pretty select as far as picking some of the better teams, from southeastern Washington and North Idaho, and bringing some schools in to play in that tournament down there in Kuski. And a great event. Silas Nerano showing up and throwing that no early in the year is impressive. I mean, that shows the work that Maniac team has been doing, winning state last year, and they're looking to repeat this year. I think they got their hands full a little bit in their conference. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be a cakewalk for them, but that team's certainly loaded and locked and ready for, a great season.
Yeah, and let's just stop down and take a look at what's going on in the 2A ranks. In that Central Idaho League, you've got Orofino off to a 7-2 start, which is outstanding. Nobody else has even played 4 games. It's been really tough for anyone to get action in. You've got, I think personally, Kellogg is going to be excellent again. Kellogg nearly got to state last year, right? They lost out to Bonners Ferry up in the 3A IML, and now they're a 2A. St. Mary's got to state last year. They were kind of the Cinderella, right? They had the sub 500 record, got hot at the right time, got to state, played pretty well for the number 8 seed. So, St. Mary's, I think, will be in the mix. And Grangeville in the past has had kind of a strong baseball program. I think they're, like so many other sports, is just getting enough bodies, but Grangeville could be sneaky too.
Yeah, I think, but it's definitely a 3-way race in that conference. I think that there could be some beating up on each other depending on who's on the bump on any given day. But Kellogg brings the bats. That's one thing I'll look at that. I mean, they can strike the ball pretty dang well. And you got athletes out there too. You got the Luna twins that are, roaming around on the field or either on the bump or, at the plate too. They hit really well as well, but they've got other players that contribute. St. Mary's is one. They brought back so many of those kids from last year's team that made that run that you spoke of that, I looked, St. Mary's could be super competitive, but Orofino, ultimately, I look at the core of what they brought back. They're my personal favorite to win the title at 2A again, but obviously it takes, completing the task at hand, as we've learned in spring sports. And I look at that team, and there's just some opportunities there that, I mean, I think Orofino, they may take a couple losses here and there because they did schedule pretty heavy, but it could be plus they have the best field in the state of Idaho. Let's just be honest about that one too. They got good friendly confines down there. So
yes.
It'll be a fun season to watch out of the CIL.
Yeah, for sure. The second no-hitter that took place since we last came on to record was at the 3A level, and it was against St. Mary's. Speaking of the Lumberjacks, Caden Robinette Timberlake threw a no-hitter against St. Mary's, and this is a 2-team race up in 3A, right? It's Timberlake, it's Bonners. Bonners won the district last year. Got to state, went 2-out, but they bring back a lot of those key pieces. Their top 2 pitchers are back in Tegan Banning and Bateman. It's a good 1-2 combo for Coach Tom Turpin. And so the onus to me is on Timberlake to try and break through, but Timberlake's got good athletes also.
Yeah, Timberlake comes up and they play consistent. That was the thing that we saw with the regular season last year, is they played so consistent throughout the regular season. They just ran into a really good Bonners Ferry and Kellogg team that competed really well in that conference. Now it's a 2-team league, and it really does come down to that series that's going to decide the district championship at the end. You could say it's 6s because I think both teams bring back so many pieces within the fielding aspect of it, but I give the pitching edge obviously to the Badgers. I think that they bring just a few more arms to the table. So I'm going to say that if this season favors Bonners Ferry, but Timberlake's a good team in their own right. So, I mean, it's going to be a competitive league.
And yet, it's going to be basically, I think, a best of 3 series to determine who goes. I mean, if Robinette, who's already thrown a no-hitter this year, comes out and gets a win for Timberlake in game 1, all of a sudden Bonners is the team that's, backed into a corner. I don't know.
Especially if there's a couple days rest in between, he may get a throw twice. That's the thing. And that right. could be the deciding factor. So
yes. So, oh my gosh, that's going to be fun to watch those two navigate all season long. Let's hop down to the 1A, and then we'll talk about the Inland Empire League. The storyline with 1A baseball is, in the history of 1A baseball, since they changed from the A1 tier system,
A3, A4,
to the present, which was in the early 2000s, the White Pine League has never lost a state championship game. District 2 has won all of the state baseball championships in the history of 1A baseball. And if we're being honest, that trend is going to continue this year. District 3 doesn't have much. The question is which team will it be?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we can make all the guesses we want, like last year, and then we end up getting the fourth place team winning state. So it doesn't
Troy
really matter what
Trojans.
we. It doesn't really matter what we think. But it could be Troy again. You never know. But I think Potlatch has some good promise to that program. Clearwater Valley again. Look at Prairie. Prairie is a sneaky team out there too, with returning some good players as well. And, can Kendrick show up out of that? We talk about basketball, them being a 1A D2 team, but they play in just the 1A. So I mean that whole league, I believe, there's no separation there, if I'm right.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So I mean, I look at Kendrick as a contender. I really do. They've got pitching, they've got fielding, they've got athletes. So like it would not surprise me one bit if we never bet against the Tigers this year. I mean, they've found a way to win almost, it seems, everything. Why not baseball too? So yeah, I think that it's going to be a very balanced league, though. I mean, you look at it flat out, it's more dominant than any other conference in the state of Idaho, and it's not even close. But yeah, I mean, the right team getting hot at the right time. I mean, that's all it's going to take. But I definitely look at the state champion will once again come out of the north. It's just kind of a matter of drawing straws and who's it going to be.
Yeah, and you'll remember last year the district tournament was wild, where the top seed was Genesee, Troy was the 2 seed, Kamei was 3, Kendrick was 4, Clearwater Valley was 5, Prairie was 6. Well, right away, Prairie knocked out Kamei in the do or die, single elimination game, and Clearwater Valley knocked out Kendrick. So your 3 and 4 seeds gone like that.
Yeah.
Then Clearwater Valley and Prairie both upset Genesee and Troy, the 1 and 2 seeds. So you had Genesee and Troy basically playing for 3rd and 4th place. And it was almost inversed, where, Prairie came in as the last seed. They won the district. Then it was Clearwater Valley, second lowest, who took second. It was almost like reverse order.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Troy came in as the 3 seed out of districts in one state. So
yeah, and that's just the nature of how things work. And like I said, bet against what you don't think is going to happen. I think that's pretty much how it's going to work out. So there's plenty of talent to go around in that conference, and so I think it's any given day it could be any team winning in that conference, and you may see somebody with a close to 500 record and win state. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yes. So yeah, when you look at this year's league, I really do think there's a good clump of teams that are capable, with Troy, the defending champs, Genesee, which always has a strong team, Clearwater Valley is going to be excellent, Prairie is going to be solid, Kendrick, I think, could break through. That's kind of the big 5 to me. Ken Potlatch.
I think they're lurking. I really do, with the talent, with the kids they got back. They're lurking.
Yep.
So,
and another sneaky team I think could be Lewis County. The Nez Perce Highland Co-op.
That's a good call there too. I think that there's talent to go around, and that just speaks to the nature of baseball in North Idaho. We'll look at Lewiston here in a little bit, but I think that there's definitely talent to go around those smaller schools, and there's like we said, we talk about arms. You get the right arm on the mound with enough days rest. I mean, you can win 2-3 games in a row pretty easy. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out.
Yeah. So let's jump up to that 5A, 4A Inland Empire League, where they basically will play each other in conference games and then have their own separate standings. At the 4A level, Sandpoint has been kind of the team that's been the lead dog the last couple of years. But I will say that Sandpoint has already slipped a couple of times in conference to Coeur d'Alene. So this is kind of the pitfall of it, is Sandpoint's 0-2 in league play. Well, yeah, both losses came to Coeur d'Alene. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Well, no, you look at the whole, and Sandpoint brings back a bunch of talent. I mean, they've got notable names on that roster, like Jack Zimmerman and some of the other guys. They've got arms in that bullpen. I think one team to keep an eye on 4A is Moscow. I think Moscow could be sneaky good this year. They're really young, but the core of that team that they've got, I mean, if you look at that sophomore junior class, you got Isaacson and Hardig, and those kids play a lot of summer ball, and they do pretty well. I mean, they compete at in the summer leagues and stuff like that. So I look at that team, that Moscow team could be sneaky good, especially later in the year in a 3-game series. Don't count them out at all. Don't count out the Bears.
Yep. At the 5A level, Lewiston, the defending champs, they did lose a lot to graduation, right? Cruz Hepburn is now, taking his talents to the next level, but they do bring back some interesting pieces. Coeur d'Alene always seems to be solid. Looks like they've got pretty decent pitching. And of course, Lake City breaking in with a new coach this year after longtime coach Paul Manzardo retired.
Yeah, and let's give a shout out to Manzardo's son. I mean, he was absolutely obliterating the baseball in AAA or in spring training. So, no, but I look at the 5A league. I still think Lewiston's the favorite. I think they've got the complete team as far as getting to state and placing. We saw what they did. I think that when they lose to Hawaii 6-4, but Lewiston can hit, they can pitch, they can field. So you look at the big three areas of the game. Coeur d'Alene, I think, has the pitching. I don't know if they've got, what it takes at the plate right now. That could come along as the season goes on, though, too. It's still really early in the year. And it's just, there's a big difference between hitting the ball in the cage and hitting the ball in the field. There's a huge difference with that. And so, as the season progresses and you get more eyes on baseballs, it's, I think things could get better. Post Falls could struggle this year. They lost CD Sharples. They returned a couple decent players, but I think the Lake City Coeur d'Alene 1-2 punch there, that could be a dark horse team. Lake City could sneaky good even with a coach, but he's been in the program for a long time, if I'm not mistaken. So, the kids are familiar with him. But I look at some of that lineup. There's some good pieces coming back for the T-Wolves.
Yeah, early leaders in the 5A IEL batting average. Nolan Christ of Coeur d'Alene, 545 batting average. These numbers will go down as the season goes along. Chris Ricard, I think, for Lewiston is going to be a good two-way player. 423 average. Joe DeCoeur from Lake City also batting 423. On the pitching side, if you look at the ERA leaders here in the early going, Isaac Ziegler yet to allow a run for Post Falls in 5 2/3 innings. Nate Weatherhead for Lake City in 5 1/3 innings. You've got Toby Elliott from Lewiston, Bryce Stockton from Coeur d'Alene. Coeur d'Alene to me has got pitching depth, which I think could serve them well, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think as we'll see, especially as the season goes on. Post Falls, deceptive a little bit, I think, because of their schedule. They've had Moscow, I think, for 3 games. And then I'm not sure. Did they go to Boise or not? I can't remember if they made it down there or not. But
Coeur d'Alene?
Post Falls.
Oh, yes. Post Falls did, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, I look at that. It's a conference that historically, teams tend to beat up on each other a little bit. But then I think the cream rises to the top towards the end of the season. And we'll see, those top 2 teams certainly pull away, especially like a Lewiston, I think, will flex a little bit as the season goes on. Plus they just get more games in down there, like weather-wise.
Right. So Post Falls went to the Bucks Bags tournament in Boise and went 1-3. And then they had 3 competitive losses. They lost to Middleton 4-1, Bora 6-1, and Timberline 3-2. So those are all pretty competitive games for Post Falls.
Yeah.
You had Lake City. They were at the Rocky Mountain. So Rocky Mountain hosts its own spring break tournament kind of for 5A schools only. And that's where Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene, and Lake City were playing. Lake City also went 1-4. They lost to Rocky, Eagle, and Madison. They beat Mountain View 5-4. Coeur d'Alene went down to that same tournament, and the Vikings went 0-4. They lost to Highland, Rocky, Owyhee, and Mountain View. And then you had Lewiston also go down to the Treasure Valley to compete, and they were at that spring break tournament. Lewiston went 3-1. They beat Centennial, Eagle, Rocky Mountain, and their one loss came to Mountain View by 1, 11-10. So I think that kind of tells the story right there, right? Lewiston still class of the league.
Yeah, I think so for sure. And the other thing that we talked about last year, I think it was the title for an episode, was like head to Lewiston. Early in the season, it just made me think of, I think, Post Falls to get their first games in this year. And I can't remember if it was Sandpoint or Lake City they played against. They had to drive down to Lewiston to play those games just to get them in. So both teams taking a road trip down to Church Field in Lewiston to get their games on early in the year. But I think that we could see that a lot this spring if it's going to be wet like it is supposed to be this week up here. That it's going to be an interesting. The snow is finally gone for the most part. We've got most of the parking lot piles are all gone, hopefully. But
right,
hopefully the weather holds off, that we don't end up with like what we had last year, where the rain just wreaked havoc for like a good 2-week stretch during the season.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's go to the softball side of it then, and we'll start at the 5A IEL where hardly anybody's played yet, so you can't put too much stock into what's happened so far. Coeur d'Alene has the top 3 hitters in terms of batting average. They've got 4 of the top 5, and they have 6 of the top 8. So Coeur d'Alene's had some hot hitting to start. Chloe Burke is leading the way with a 545 average. Lewiston, we know, is good. They've got 3 Barney girls, or they had 3 Barney girls last year. Now there's only 2. And then, Post Falls with second-year coach Katie Sin, I think also is a team to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and that's a young roster too. I mean, you look at their one experienced player, I believe, is Katie Berg. But they've got athletes in that team, and that was a team last year that went 16-8. So yeah, I look at Coeur d'Alene being their early favorite in that conference just based on the pieces that they have there. Lewiston could certainly, I think, make some noise, especially with Barney on the mound. I mean, pitching, I think that's certainly a good role for her, and I know their coach likes that lineup as far as what they've got this year. We'll see how they can hit. I think that's going to be the question mark, is if they can generate runs. We know that they can field and pitch, but if they can start generating runs, that's a dangerous team. Lake City is, they struggled last year. We'll see how they respond this year, but it should be an interesting conference, at least I think, between the top 3 teams.
Yeah, you want to talk about pitching power at the top. Jenna Barney from Lewiston, you talked about. She's thrown 22 innings so far this year, 20 strikeouts. It's almost a strikeout per inning.
That's impressive.
And
that's a ridiculous stat. Yeah.
And Lexi McCarroll from Post Falls has also thrown 22 innings. She has 23 strikeouts. So she is averaging a strikeout per inning. So.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, that's bordering on like what Tacey Watkins is doing too. So
we'll get to her. Yeah, don't worry.
Don't worry about that one. Yeah, but no, I like the 5A. I think the league is super competitive this year, and it'll be exciting to see how things shake out. I really am looking that like there is going to be a legitimate contender come out of the North this year in softball.
Yes. Post Falls is 1-1 in league play. Nobody else has played in league yet. And you're going, well, where did the 1-1 split come? It came with Moscow. So let's go to the 4A IEL, where Moscow is already gotten a split with Post Falls. We know Lakeland typically has
a fun league this year. I think
right?
The 4A is going to be interesting.
How do you think it's going to shake out?
I think it's going to be really similar to last year. I think it might come down to Lakeland and Moscow. I really do. Lakeland returned a lot of pieces from that magical run that they kind of ended up with last year, that they entered state as an 8 seed and made it to the 4th place game. The Hawks returned some of the players from that team, and they do have some youth in there too, but so does Moscow. I look, kind of down the stretch, what can take place. I mean, if we see a slugfest in a loser out game, for who makes it to state, that's certainly not going to surprise you if we see a 14-12 game or something like that to end the year. But that's just kind of the nature of softball in North Idaho. Sandpoint last year struggled. I know that they returned some decent players from that team. So, if they can just build some momentum and see if that program can start to turn around this year, it'd be a good year for it. But the 4A, I'd just say right now, keep an eye on Moscow and Lakeland.
Yeah, and that's going to be, they're all going to kind of beat up on each other as the season progresses, for sure. 3A, it's Bonners Ferry, it's Timberlake. This is Timberlake's deal to lose. Bonners Ferry is trying to rebuild their program a little bit. They struggled last year. They're off to a tough start this year. And Timberlake is so good. Cassie Lupinacci does such a great job with that program. She's a great coach. Acacia Pecor in the pitcher's circle for Timberlake this year, 22.2 innings pitched, 33 strikeouts already. Just saying.
And I believe that's against one of those games was against St. Mary's too. So
yes,
that's impressive.
And Pecor also batting .333 at the plate. Logan Walsh, Ashley Grantham, Topanga Rojas, Jesse Kitchen. I mean, Timberlake's got so many outstanding players that they are.
That's an all-name team too. I mean, like, that's just awesome names,
right? the all-name team, for sure. So for Timberlake, it's all about, can we get to state and break through and end Homedale's little run of excellence at the 3A level for Timberlake. I think they've got a shot.
Yeah, if you can get to state and get a good draw, and you get Pecor on a run, on the mound early in those state games. I mean, that makes for a big difference. I mean, even if you don't need to use her necessarily in game one, and you get a good offensive production behind her or behind whoever's on the mound, I like Timberlake a lot. I think that they could definitely make some noise this year for sure.
Okay, let's move to the 2A CIL Central Idaho League. Whereas promised, Casey Watkins from St. Mary's.
Newsflash, she's still really good.
So they played Timberlake and lost 4-1, but Watkins had 17 strikeouts in that loss
against that lineup. That's so
yes.
freaking good. That's so good.
To me, she's the best pitcher in the state.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Absolutely. I would put money on that one for sure.
So Tacey has thrown 21 and a third innings. She has 45 strikeouts already. That's more than 2 per inning.
She had 226 last year. So, I mean, I think she's on pace to, beat that by at least 60, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean,
if I'm doing the math correctly, she's going to beat her strikeout number from last year if she continues this clip.
Yeah, and she's got a .98 ERA. I mean, we're talking microscopic numbers here.
No, that's worse than last year, though. She was a .5 last year. Oh, she's doubled her ERA. I mean, how dare her?
Right? And so for St. Mary's, they've been basically in the final three the last couple of seasons. Can they break through? I think it's wide open this year.
Yeah.
Malata will be good again. West Jefferson will be good again. St. Mary's will be good. Those were the final three last year. I could easily see it being those three again this year. The question is can St. Mary's get enough offense at state to break through? So,
the team that we talk about offense, I think the team that's going to be one to watch out of the conference, though, is going to be Kellogg. If we're speaking about offense, I think that they can hit. But it's like if you're being handcuffed by Tacey Watkins and you can manufacture at least 5 runs a game, I think that really increases your winning percentage significantly if you're St. Mary's. But I would keep an eye on Kellogg. I think that they could certainly make things interesting in that league.
Yes, Kellogg will be good. I think Orofino could be sneaky. And Grangeville, also Maddie Thacker in the circle is a pretty good pitcher for Grangeville also. Okay, and then we've got at the 1A level, kind of a similar story, not quite the level of dominance that we've seen in baseball, but generally the champion seems to come from the north in 1A softball.
Mm-hmm.
Glens Ferry did win it a couple of years ago, but you look at the White Pine League, and just like in baseball, it's not a question of, will the league come through with the championship, but it's which team claims that title.
Yeah, and I think what didn't notice, they were competitive last year too at state, if I'm not mistaken.
So they were. So Notice was pretty decent, but the thing with Notice is that they may not have enough players for a team this year, which is just they're kind of trying to get enough players, and they've kind of postponed their early games to try and drum up enough interest. But man, that's a sad deal down there.
Yeah,
for sure.
that'd be really sad because they were super competitive last year.
Yeah.
But speaking of the 1A, up north, I mean, gosh, you have to look at Clearwater Valley, Kendrick Prairie. I mean, I think is your big 3 right now.
And you didn't even mention Potlatch. Potlatch.
But here's the deal. No, but I think coming in early, Potlatch is really good. We know they're good, but I think that there may be a little bit of this feeling of like changing of the guard type of situation going. We just based on the athletes that are within each program respectively. It's a top 5. Like there's a 5 team like stack up on top. I really look at it that way. And who comes out any given day and gets hot. Potlatch, I think, is going to be really freaking good. Genesee, I think, is going to be really good as well. They return, I think, the entire lineup that they had last year. I don't think they graduated anybody. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I look at Kendrick's got a pretty good core group of girls too. And so, and certainly I'm looking at it too. And like, who else is there? Is like Prairie. Yeah. They've got Tara Schlater, Ember Martin. Man, I'm sorry. I'm like stuck. I'm like, that's such a good conference. I don't know if I can pick the winner yet. I will stick with Potlatch as the early season favorite. But I really look at this year. I think we're going to see a dark horse win districts. I really do.
Okay. So Potlatch, had Rebecca Butterfield the past couple of years really lead that pitching staff. She's now graduated. Who takes the mantle? They've still got Josie Larson. They've still got Tava McKinley. I think Potlatch has some pretty good athletes. Jessica Kitola quietly has been a very good pitcher for Clearwater Valley early on this season as well. So to me, it's still Potlatch, and we'll see who else can maybe challenge. But yeah, the White Pine League is going to be a lot of fun to watch in softball for sure. So, and again, we have spring sports previews for track and field, baseball, and softball, all at the top of the homepage on IdahoSports.com. If you want to see what's happening, not just up north, but, kind of statewide, who are the teams we're focused on that we think might do well, athletes, all that good stuff. It's all right there at IdahoSports.com as we are off and running with the spring sports season, Ryan.
Yeah. Just kind of a random one. We talked about tennis, but I think that we can mention golf. Is small school golf in North Idaho better than 5A and 4A this year?
Ooh, that's I think the Coeur d'Alene Vikings would disagree with that, and
Sure.
Moscow maybe, but we'll
As
see.
a whole, I mean, like that, there's some really good small school teams up here this year, so I think it'll be interesting to see. At least on the girls' side, I like Bonners Ferry a whole lot, and I think that there's a reason to like that team too. But it'll be interesting to see how things shake out down the season because I think St. Mary's boys has been really competitive early on as well. So. Yeah.
Yes, we had the season opening invite in Clarkston a couple weeks ago, and again, it's just the 3A, 2A, 1A schools that are golfing in the spring.
Yep.
Your medalist was Seth Swallows of St. Mary's. He went over and actually won the individual title. But you're right, teams we're looking at: Bonners Ferry girls, Kellogg always is very strong in both boys and girls golf. St. Mary's boys and girls always seem to be good. And you mentioned Genesis Prep has a couple of good golfers.
Yeah, Genesis Prep's got a couple that are noteworthy, and I think that we'll see this kind of take shape, I guess, as you could say, like as things go further on down the season, obviously. But there's some competitors. We may see a medalist come out of the north for sure. I think at least respectively a 2A in the boys' side and maybe 3A in the girls' side.
Yeah, it definitely could happen. So we'll keep an eye on spring golf as well. And we'll find out weather-wise, which was better, fall or spring. So
the
far,
courses play completely different too. That's what's so crazy about having that split season with the large school and small school is that those courses play completely different early in the year than they do late in the year too.
Yes, for sure. So, all right. Well, thanks for hopping back in with us here on the North Idaho Prepcast. We'll be with you every week to talk about what's going on in the spring sports landscape from now till the end of the school year. So it's good to be back in it. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney, and we'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.